morning. Here is another episode of Quarantine Connect 2020. I am so glad to have a friend with me today. He's a psychologist. Yes, he's a psychologist, and he's a director at AscendAbl. And we've just met, and I decided that we are going to discuss a few interesting things here about leadership, about pursuing a career in psychology, and any other challenges that employees are facing these days in terms of their emotions, in terms of managing with their colleagues, in terms of standing up to expectations of their leaders and their managers. So let's begin the conversation and let's see where we go. Hi, Rob, how are you?
Hello, Nousheen. I'm very well. Thank you for having me along. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you so much. I'm glad you joined us today, and I know we are going to have some very exciting conversation.
I hope so. I hope so.
Yeah. So starting with the first thing first, I want you to introduce yourself and tell us why and how you made use of psychology as a career.
Okay, no problem at all. Well, as you said, I'm director of AscendAbl. AscendAbl is a training organisation that provides sort of leadership development, employee engagement, in diversity and inclusion to organisations. Personally, myself, I've always been in psychology. I began my career in the clinical counselling side of psychology, and I had a successful private practice for a number of years. Really enjoyed the work, love working with people and seeing change in their lives. But I decided I'd like a bit more variety, and I would like to do psychology at scale. So my idea was I could probably facilitate that best through business psychology. So I completed another master's in occupational psychology and moved into the field 4 or 5 years ago, and found that training facilitation was definitely where my skills lay, as well as the executive coaching from having done the one-to-one clinical work. So here I am today running this organisation and really loving what I do. Obviously things have changed in the last few months as my face-to-face work went out of the window, and which was a little tricky. It's suddenly happening.
Yes.
So, you know, we've adapted like everyone else.
And the odd thing is nobody was expecting this to happen. Nobody knew it's going to be there, and everybody will be just at a distance and everybody will go virtual. Nobody was expecting that. That's the interesting part.
And I think not only were people not expecting it, but we were all in a bit of a state of denial at the beginning. So even when it did happen, we all sort of sat there and went, oh, it'll pass, you know, things will be back to normal soon. And we rested on our laurels a little bit, and then suddenly went, oh,
I tell myself every day, I'm going to go out the next day. Everything's going to be all right.
I sat there for at least a week and went, oh, I don't need to change my stuff to virtual trainings because I'll be back in the office, you know, or back in the training centre. And then slowly but surely things, that's cancelled. And I was like, okay, looks like I now need to adjust what I'm doing because this is going to happen.
Yes, I think it's going to take some time and it's not going to go away so quickly. This is what I think. Yeah.
And I think that's part of the problem, is that people are going to, you know, I hate to use this word unprecedented because it's just used so much, but at the same time, it is just so apt. You know, the word is so spot on. We are going to have to make huge adjustments to the world that we are going to live in now. And I think that's part of the reason that it's so problematic for people. They've lost so much certainty, and they're trying to navigate through very ambiguous times.
Yes, true. Absolutely right. So, you know, both of us have one thing in common. I'm a little very, very tiny bit of a psychologist. I studied psychology for like some 6 years. 2 years before my college and 2 years during my bachelor's. And when I was studying psychology, yes, I loved it. It gave me a lot of insight into human mind and the way we think and the way we accept things.
You're a bit of a psychologist, but I think 6 years makes you more than a bit of a psychologist.
It does. So at that time, I was not able to understand how I can depend on psychology for building my career. And I was a little bit confused how it's going to build up my future. And you know what I did? I chose to study literature, and I went for a major in literature rather than psychology, because there was no counseling in the college. Nobody was telling me there could be psychology for business, and I could actually practically use it instead of becoming a clinical psychologist or a psychiatrist. And now when I'm talking to you, I'm surprised why it wasn't there. So what were the reasons for which you chose to continue your career as a psychologist?
Well, I chose to pursue it because I've always loved psychology. I'm one of those lucky people who very early on in my life knew that I wanted to be a psychologist. So I did a lot of research into exactly how do I do that and what's the path I can take. I knew it was going to be very difficult for me coming out of university and going straight onto a clinical doctorate. They're very hard to get onto. There's a huge amount of competition. So I had to be creative in other ways of getting into it. Which is why I started my role as a counsellor, did a counselling diploma, got a role that was 50% case manager, 50% counsellor at a drug and alcohol rehab, but then used that as a stepping stone into further training and getting into the NHS, into our service in our, so for your viewers, I'm in the UK at the moment, so there'll be a slight difference between our countries and how the psychology system works.
Yeah.
But I used it as a stepping stone to get into our National Health Service, into our psychology department, I suppose. Mm-hmm. But it's tricky, and often I find universities are not overly clear on the pathways that you can take and how to get into them. Mm-hmm. I've recently, even in the last couple of years, been going back to my old university to give speeches to the students on the careers that they can take, but that's only been introduced in the last couple of years. So I think, unfortunately, it's not well communicated to people. And what I've seen that I know from my cohort when I graduated is I'd say maybe 10% of them actually ended up in the psychology field. 90% of people end up moving into just
something different,
any kind of people jobs, or something totally different than psychology.
A lot of my friends who were with me during my bachelor's studying psychology, I don't see them anyway. I don't know why. I think something needs to be done in universities in Pakistan. Anyways, coming back to our professional talk again, we want to understand the emotions, what kind of emotions we are going through as employees, and how we can take control of our emotions while we are all working remotely and are trying to coordinate with our team members, are trying to communicate more efficiently with our leaders, how we can keep things going in a smooth way, how we can stop thinking negatively, how we can stop feeling disconnected. Mm-hmm. Because it's different when you are in the same room with everybody and talking, and it's different when you are on a screen talking to them and your kids are all around you. So it's different, and how we can manage that. This is my question.
Yes. And it's a very valid question, and it's also a very big question, because there is so much going on and there's so much complexity in what's happening right now. I think the first thing to do is to really get a base for what we're missing and why that makes now so difficult. And I think a way of introducing it is there is a model that is used in psychology called the SCARF model. So SCARF. It was introduced by a gentleman called David Rock of the Neuro Leadership Institute. And I just think it's a lovely way of summarizing human needs and what happens when we either fulfill those needs or whether we exclude those needs. So the S of SCARF stands for status. And you just said there, if we're not around people, we're not in the same offices, then we can't see what they're doing. We don't know where we stand with people. So straight away, we lose an element of connection and we lose an element of knowing where we stand. And that can mean our internal dialogue gets going and we start to question ourselves. Am I doing enough? You know, should I be doing more? Should I really close down my laptop for the day because other people expect that I should be available? So status we start to lose our status. It sends us into what we call a threat state, which is where our limbic system, the threat part of our brain in here, is firing off, and that inhibits any kind of helpful behaviors and positive thinking and problem solving, creativity, innovation, everything else. Okay, so the C of SCARF is around certainty, and we've lost a huge amount of certainty. We don't know what's going to happen with our jobs. We don't know what's going to happen with going back to work, with our organization, with the local economy, with the global economy. All of that certainty's gone out of the window, and that's leaving us feeling very uncertain and very uncomfortable. The A of the SCARF model is autonomy, and again, when we are locked in our houses, all of our autonomy's gone. We can't choose where to go to eat, who we're going to see. So we lose that sense of autonomy, and we feel very uncomfortable if we can't choose things day to day. The R is relatedness. We need to connect with people. We need to be around them. We're social creatures. We're mammals. We need to bond with other people. And having conversations like this is fantastic, but it's no substitute for being in the same room as someone and connecting with them. And the final thing is fairness. We all went about our day-to-day thinking we're doing the right thing, and if I keep doing the right thing, I'm on this trajectory that I have in my mind. And then suddenly this happens through no fault of our own, and we're thrown into this very, very strange situation. So we don't feel like it's particularly fair either. So with all of this happening, it's throwing us into this state of threat where we're feeling very uncomfortable. And what we really want to be able to do is to fulfill some of those human needs and move into what we call a toward state. So you'll know a toward state when you're spending time with people, things feel good at work, and you're doing what means something to you. There's purpose there. You're connecting. You feel like you're equal to other people. That's when we're in a toward state, and that's what we're missing right now. So once we identify these are our human needs and we're missing these, the key thing is to go, how do I start fulfilling some of these? What can I do as an individual to ensure that I have some sort of status and certainty and autonomy and relatedness and fairness? That's where it becomes tricky, because that takes some real creative thinking and takes a lot of discipline as well. We have to really start planning our days and going, I'm going to do this and this to try and fulfill some of that.
Okay, I get it. You've explained it very clearly. So coming to the point where we are bombarded with things like you need to be positive, you need to have an attitude that takes you somewhere which is good, you need to be productive, you need to have a growth mindset, you need to be very willing to contribute to the best of your potential at work. We understand that you're not there, like you're not in the office, you're working from home, but still you need to be this good. So when the expectations are that high, and we are given so much to chew and then give the best work out, in such a scenario, how can we be our best practically and actually do away with all the distractions that come our way and manage the day-to-day routine and still get the right appreciation from our managers? How can we be the best version of ourselves with all that comes in our platter every day?
Well, the first thing I'd say is that it's extremely difficult too. I've been speaking to a number of leaders, and a lot of them still have this mentality that we're just working remotely. It's business as usual. We're just working remotely. And the trouble is, if you maintain that expectation and belief, you will be sadly disappointed, because there is no way right now that people can achieve what they did before sustainably. And I have to emphasize that point, sustainably. We can achieve what we have done before, but only if we stretch ourselves and push ourselves, and we're working at night and we're working all hours and we're not having breaks, because right now we've lost all of those things I just talked about, but we're trying to achieve the same thing. So if that's expected of us, then our leaders and us, we're in for disappointment. So the first thing we need to do is shift expectations. If our leaders are maintaining that expectation, then we have to, whilst that is there, come back to our own expectations and start to modify them and go, is okay? Even if that might not be okay, what do I see as okay? Because the more pressure you put on yourself, actually the worse you will do. Now, I know that sounds counterintuitive, but what happens in our brain is when we put pressure on ourselves and we start telling ourselves we're not doing enough, we should be better, everyone else is doing great, we're not getting it, there's more I should be doing, there's more I could be doing. What that's actually doing in your brain is causing your amygdala to flare, and that starts to become overly active. When your brain starts firing in that area, it shuts down a lot of the processing in your prefrontal cortex, which does all of your logical, rational thinking. It does all of your creative thinking. It does all of your innovative thinking. It helps you with collaborating with other people. Yeah. So as much as we feel like, oh, if I'm telling myself I should be better, it's willing me forward, actually what it's going to start doing is inhibiting you. And so if we're trying to be good sustainably, that's not going to happen if we're putting loads and loads of pressure on ourselves. So what we have to do is shift our mindset from being really pressured on ourselves to go, well, okay, let's focus on what I would like to do. Take pressure off, but let's plan. Let's think about what I can do. Because if I'm spending time thinking about what I can't do, that's not doing me any good. So that's one of the first things we need to do. Take the pressure off, realize that, yes, every person you see on LinkedIn will be telling you how they've got this great, fantastic growth mindset, and they're doing better than they did before all of this stuff happened with COVID.
And there's zillions of webinars going on.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think we went into a bit of a grief cycle when this all happened. And it takes time to go through a grief cycle. And, the first part is denial, and then you have to go through some other stages. But there were people from day one going, right, yeah, I've adapted now. This is great. I'm going to do this, and this is an opportunity. And I think they were lying to themselves.
I've been working, I have a company in Pakistan. So I've been working with my remote team since 2012. So when this happened, I was like, okay, what's the big deal? So if companies are used to managing things differently in different situations, they will not have, what I feel, they will not have problem with managing the employees. They will not have employee attitude changing, because people are they're already in the flow. But that might not work with all sorts of businesses. Mine is an exception because it's all about branding and advertising. So this can be taken care of. But there are all kinds of different businesses that might not work that way.
Yes, and I think that's why agility is so key. We've been talking about agility and flexibility and adaptability for leaders and managers for years, and some organizations have not taken that seriously. This is why we need to be taking it seriously. Unprecedented, there's that word again, but unprecedented things like this happen, and the companies that will survive are the ones where their managers can go, right, different scenario, people have the same needs, how am I going to meet them? And they're going to adapt to that, because as you say, there's going to be some companies who've been working remotely and they can manage this better, others who it's totally new for them and they're not set up, they don't have the infrastructure. I've been working with investment bankers who tell me they're at work and they have 4 screens, and then now they're working from home and they have a little laptop, and that that instantly is going to affect their efficiency and their productivity, regardless of what then even happens with the people management side of things, which I actually think is probably the most important part, is the people side of things. That's how you're going to get the best from people.
So coming back to performance criteria and how we are being judged for our work, as an employee, for example, if somebody is doing a great job and they're doing their best and they're going by the book, do you think it will save them their job during the pandemic? Is there a way of securing one's job and not getting laid off?
I don't like to make such black and white answers to things, but I think, if I'm honest, no, there is nothing that can absolutely save anyone's job right now. There are so many factors at play, from a team level to an organizational level to a sort of global industrial level, that no one can totally future-proof their job at their organization. However, what I would say that we can do is look how we future-proof ourselves. So even if our role is not saved at our organization, we are in a better position if we go somewhere else. I would also say that where we focus our attention is key too. If we spend a lot of time, watching the news and seeing what's happening with organizations and economies, that is going to make us worry more, and that is actually going to decrease our capacity to do what we need to do now. So what I would say is whilst we can't future-proof it for certain, what we can start to do is demonstrate our talents. If we think about what does our organization want from us right now? Well, they want us to deliver. Okay, that's great. Let's talk about delivery. Let's do what we can. Let's do what we've done before to deliver. But what else? Is there that extra bit I could do? And I think one of the things is to begin to really be aware of your strengths and build upon your strengths. Let's start showcasing them. Let's show the people around us, including our managers, what value we really bring. What can we do? Your managers are going to have pain points. Can our strengths help them solve those pain points? And we need to sort of, like I say, really showcase them. It's not enough just going, okay, I'm a creative person. well, what opportunities can I go, I can help with this, I can help with that. So I'd say we need to have a very conscious understanding of what our strengths are, and then start to demonstrate them and show them to the person above us, and hope that when we start fixing their pain points, they start to talk about us fondly and know that we're central part of their team, and therefore that cements our place in it a little bit more. Like I say, we can't be sure that it's going to be totally future-proof, but at least we can start helping ourselves in that area.
Great.
Another thing I would say to do is almost behave like you're in a role above yourself. So, you know, this is almost my competency framework and what's expected of me at this level. What would I be doing if I was one above? What would be the behaviors that I'm displaying? And when it comes to that, I would also say then split that into two sections. One being technically, what would I be doing? How would I be doing things? But the other part being interpersonally. There's a really interesting graph, and it's the warm competence scale. And it essentially says that as human beings, we're drawn to people who are very competent technically, but we're also drawn to people who are very warm interpersonally. And that's how we see competence. That's how we see people as being useful and helpful, and how valuable they are. But we're not always warm and competent. Some of us are very, very competent, overly competent, but we don't necessarily have the warmth. Others are very, very warm and they're lovely people, but we're maybe not as technically skilled as we should be. So what I'd say to people is, if they're thinking about trying to demonstrate their value more, is ensure that we're up there on the warmth as well as the technical side. That's what's really going to demonstrate our value the most.
This is great advice. All right, thank you so much for being with me today, Rob. I have learned a lot of different facts from you today, things that were not said by many people who were talking to me on the episodes before. So I really value that, and I want to invite you to one of my live shows on LinkedIn. Let's do it in the coming week together. We will set up the time and advertise according to the topic that we both agree on. And let's do it. Let's add value to people's lives.
Lovely. It sounds fantastic. Would love to. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
You too. Take care.